This is Shuja Rabbani, and you are listening to the Pod Your Heart Out podcast. I believe that the right to work in a safe and healthy work environment is everyone's human right. A workplace where there is humanity in human resources and a place where leadership leads by example. Join me in today's conversation if you see yourself as an advocate for that kind of workplace. Have you ever worked with a leader or somebody in the office who loses their temper, or that they are a very short-tempered person when you're dealing with them, sometimes just coming under a little bit of a pressure and they just crack? That is the subject of today's conversation, and the inspiration for today's conversation comes from the news that broke out earlier this year about Tom Cruise completely losing his cool at a couple of staff members on the set of the next Mission Impossible movie. I'm going to play you a short snippet of the audio recording that was leaked to the media. The original recording to the maximum length that I was able to find, which is about 2 minutes, 20 seconds of Tom Cruise basically just yelling at the top of his lungs at the staff. But I will play a shorter snippet of it just for you to have an idea. And then we will discuss how leaders who lose their cool, crack under pressure, how they really end up impacting an organization's work culture and just the atmosphere, how it negatively impacts the atmosphere. So have a listen to this snippet and then I'll talk further on this topic.
I don't ever want to see it again! Ever! And if you don't do it, you're fired! And I see you do it again, you're gone! And anyone on this crew does it! That's it! And you too! And you too! And you! Don't you ever do it again! That's it! No apologies!
Right. So if you've ever worked with leaders who lose their temper from time to time or sometimes always, that snippet probably reminds you of what it's like dealing with people who lose their tempers in the office or just in general when you deal with them. Now, in the context of this particular case where Tom Cruise was completely going nuts, some people were actually on his side saying that it is understandable that we are in the middle of a global pandemic and safety measures are of utmost necessity, that when you're on the job, you need to be abiding by safety rules, which is very much correct. I mean, that is how it's meant to be. But how it's communicated, the thing is that it's not just the act of what's done, but it's also how the communication is done in order to have any kind of influence over people. From my experience, leaders who are known to constantly lose their temper and lose their cool and are certainly in need of anger management. In fact, they probably need to take some time off for their mental well-being. They tend to lose their authority over people over time, because I think anger does not come from a place of passion. Sometimes people confuse angry people, at work because they believe that, this person is very passionate. But passion does not come from a negative space. Passion does not come from a place of frustration. I think passion comes from a place of love. Passion comes from a place of positivity. And you anything that you are passionate about, it's meant to give energy to it as opposed to take energy away from it. So for me, anger is not equivalent of passion. I don't think people should be confusing the two, because anger takes energy out of people and it also takes energy out of a positive work environment. So think about how angry people negatively impact a work environment. Now imagine if the angry person is somebody who is leading the organization, and it leads to a very fearful work environment. It leads to a work environment where people are expected to be yes people, people who just say yes to everything. And it's an environment where creativity and innovation doesn't come into fruition, because you just never know at what point in time will the leader's temper will just explode because he or she may not like what they are hearing. The other thing to keep in mind is that the inability of a leader to control their temper or to manage their anger, it roots out to the lack of self-control, and lack of self-control in terms of regulating their emotions, lack of self-management in terms of controlling or managing their anger. It roots back to emotional intelligence, which anybody in the space of leadership and management would understand that, or would know that in the past couple of decades, emotional intelligence is proven to be much more important skill and much more important in determining and being a success factor of a leader than the IQ of that person or the competence of that person, because emotional intelligence, it's that critical skill, the number one skill in leadership that you need in order to succeed, in order to influence people, in order to gain people's trust, in order to connect with people. So there's a lot more to it. And when you see people who are angry in the office or leaders who lose their temper, it's a reminder that the person needs to work on their emotional intelligence. The person needs to work on their self-control, self-management, and how their ability to regulate their emotions. And at the end of the day, if that person continues to behave in that manner, it is that individual who will shape out the culture of the workplace, whether they realize it or not, whether they understand it or not. Their behavior will then set that role model for the rest of the management team or for the rest of the organization, because then everybody else will think that, okay, so it's completely acceptable then to start yelling and screaming at everybody in the workplace if things are not getting done, or if they need to communicate something, because that's what the leader has been doing and it's been happening over extended period of time. So it just becomes a part of the corporate culture or the work culture, which actually is not a good thing. The good news, though, is that emotional intelligence, just like all the other skills, is learnable. You can learn to regulate your emotions. You can learn to be more self-aware. And there are many tools out there that help out leaders in developing their leadership skills and developing their emotional intelligence skills. Specifically, actually, there are assessments out there such as the Emotional Quotient 2.0 by a Canadian-based organization called MHS. So if you're somebody who's ever had to deal with a leadership team or a management team where they really needed to have some sense of control over their emotions and regulate their emotions, manage their temper, I would love to hear from you. What tools did you use? What kind of materials or anything that you may have used in terms of training that you provided? I would love to hear from you, because this is something that really does impact a workplace at the culture level, which is the fabric of why people would want to remain or leave the organization. So I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me on info@podyourheartout.com. You can also visit www.podyourheartout.com for more information and resources. This brings me to the end of season 1. This is the last episode of season 1 of Pod Your Heart Out podcast. It's been 6 months we've been on air, so I'm very, very proud and happy that we've reached this milestone. And in season 2, I do plan on bringing on board guests. So the guest series is something that I'm planning on bringing on board for the next season, and I look forward to your participation. So thank you very much for subscribing. Please share this podcast and let everybody that you know in your group or in your team who are interested in the field of human resources or leadership to subscribe to Pod Your Heart podcast. And if you know of somebody who you believe would make a great guest, by all means, shoot me an email and I would love to hear from you. Thank you, and see you in season 2 of Pod Your Heart Out podcast.